Hello people and welcome back and Happy New Year, I've got to say. All the best for 2019. Happy Hogmanay. Anyway, let's start off this year with getting rid of Mudflood theory, guys. Mudflood theory is a theory that there was a global mudflood. In the 1850s, by the way, in the 1850s, a global mudflood that wiped away most of mankind and most of technology and advanced, what they calling it? Antiquitech. Giants, Tartaria, missing civilizations, all this rubbish. Let's nip this in the bud for 2019, people. Because for starters, 1850, I've got trees outside that are older than 1850. I've got mines, quarries, buildings, all sorts of stuff just a stone's throw away that debunks all this 1850 rubbish. I think it's people that maybe live in an area where there's been massive redevelopment. Maybe it was late colonised like Australia and America. Maybe they don't understand how the passage of time goes, how the lands can change. But this mudflood theory is ridiculous, and anyone who's supporting it just looks like a total idiot. And the thing is, it's not that I don't rule out a massive catastrophe. I do think a massive global catastrophe happened. And like I said, I think this happened, the epicenter of it was in Scotland. I think this is what changed the whole European culture. I think the Celts were worshipping a form of paganism. They had their polytheistic gods. And this one comet rendered all of them useless. The moon goddess, the sun god, the father sky, the mother earth, they were useless when this one celestial object came in, this mono. And this is where I think the shift came, because I don't think this was forced on the Celts. I think they chose to move, because the effects of this catastrophe were so poignant that they knew they couldn't lie to themselves anymore. They couldn't keep worshipping the goddess of fertility or the goddess of harvest if they aren't getting a harvest. They can't worship the sun god if the skies are blacked out. They can't worship the moon goddess if the skies are blacked out because of this one impact. So I think this is where they get the idea of the light bringer, Lucifer, Lu, the Celtic god Lu, I think is connected with this. And I think this is where there's a very intrinsic knot tied with Christianity and Celtic religion. And like myself, I won't even call myself a Christian, because I think all this was plagiarized by Rome, and they've added, the Romans were the best plagiarizers. For starters, they already had a Greek form of religion. Their religion was Hellenistic, so they believed in all the Greek gods and goddesses, and they did so when they came to Scotland and Britain. And I think they left with this new religion from Britain, took it to Rome, placed it in a new place, put new people in it, and they've totally disfigured what was a strong Celtic culture, and they've made it into their own, and now they're controlling it, they've monopolised it with the Pope. And I think this is where the real distraction, this is a real manipulation of history and a religion, and it's important, people. If we think the Holy Land is in Britain, what does that make this third temple in Israel? It makes it, there's no point in it. They're talking about this temple causing a third world war. What if there was never any temples there to begin with? What if it's all been made up? What if there's more evidence that these events in the Bible and these people in the Bible actually happened on the Isle of Britain? The Isles. And I think this is where the old stories of Noah, the flood, I think there was a great flood. Even though that's why I got into the subject, mudflood. Oh, I thought, mudflood, but then when I saw the dates, and this is another thing, when you see the footage of liquefaction in an area, like an actual mudflood, there is footage on YouTube of places in Asia getting wiped out with a mudflood. the whole land just turns to liquid mud. Every building gets toppled over, trees get uprooted, the whole place is like apocalyptic. But according to these mud flooders on the internet, like Martin Leakey and Mudflood, Flooder and Conspiracy this, these buildings remained intact, while the mud eased its way around the buildings. So this is just more evidence that this is nonsense. And where did the flood come from? If it was global, where was the epicenter of this mud flood? Where was it? Where was the epicenter of this mud flood? And nobody can answer any of this. And that's the thing, that's when you know it's similar to flat earth and you're coming across similar people like flat earthers. Because when you present evidence to them, they don't want to see it. And when you listen to their videos, they don't want to present anything contradicting what they believe. They're looking for confirmation bias. They're looking for it. And I'm guilty of it too. Even in my own theories I'm going to present to you now, I have tendencies to have a small piece of bias because I'm Scottish, I'm Celtic. But that doesn't take away the fact the evidence I will present to you does link this Britain, this Isle of Britain, and the Celtic culture, Irish, Scots, Welsh, to the Bible. The tribes of the Exodus were the tribes of Britain. The Holy Land being conquered, I think, could be the Norman invasion of Britain. So, like I said, this mud flood nonsense should be put at the window, and we should try and embrace something that's real. Like this, there was a catastrophic event. Christianity began in Britain. The Romans plagiarized it. And I'll show you evidence that there was a great flood in Britain. There was a place called Doggerland, a whole area the size of a country between Britain and France. And they found archaeological evidence that there were settlements there, there was people there, they found advanced fabric there. So the story of a great flood, an origin story that the Irish have as well, stems down from this Doggerland event that happened in 6000 BC or something like that. And it didn't happen at once, it was a gradual thing. It was a gradual thing. And then I think in 2000 BC or 2800 BC, there was a massive slide which created a tsunami. So the final flooding was probably more traumatic, was probably more instant, and came as a tsunami, which probably covered most of Britain in water. But then the water receded again, but not completely. Doggerland was left completely covered. So these great flood stories do have an element of truth in them, definitely. And they're linked to the Bible, and they're linked to Britain and Western Europe, not the Middle East. Even if you look into the patriarchs, like Jacob and Isaac, and the places where they're meant to be buried in Israel and Judah, and you can't even find them, you can't even find them. They've moved Mount Zion about 3 times. They don't even know where these places are. It's so sketchy. And even Jewish scholars say that the chambers of these patriarchs are fake. So I think there's more evidence pointing towards the people in the Bible coming from Britain. And it's all to do with bloodlines, movements of people, the history. And I think Comyns Beaumont was onto something. But he digresses into giants, and he makes massive assumptions without presenting any scientific evidence, which I will do. I will make an assumption, then present some evidence to back up my assumption. And if anybody out there has anything that goes against or contradicts my opinion, I will look at that as well, because it might help me. So Doggerland, big flood, definitely connected to the Irish origins and the Bible origins, like Noah flood, the beginnings. And the whole idea of monotheism, like worshipping many gods and then worshipping one god, I think comes to this from this comet arrival. Anyway, people, I'll show you some evidence of this. I'll get my mug into the corner. But like I said, this mud flood stuff is nonsense. Total nonsense, people. And if we want to embrace the real history, We have to look at the evidence. So, they claim there was a great flood. So people, there's a place called Doggerland. And this was a massive piece of land. It took us back here. But like you can see in these stages, the formation, these different stages, that Britain was in Atlantis, was a giant piece of land. The English Channel didn't even exist. The Firth of Forth out there didn't even exist before this great flood. So Doggerland is definitely a candidate for the cause of the Great Flood in these origin stories. Doggerland was an area of land now submerged beneath the southern North Sea and connected Great Britain to continental Europe. It was flooded by rising sea levels around 6,500, 6,200 BC. Geological surveys have suggested that it stretched from Britain's east coast to the Netherlands and the western coast of Germany and the peninsula of Jutland. It was probably a rich habitat with human habitation in the Mesolithic period, although rising sea levels gradually reduced it to low-lying islands before its final submergence, possibly following a tsunami caused by the Storegga slide. And this is what I was talking about, people, with the slide that caused the tsunami. So there definitely was a flood in Britain, people. There was a great flood, and it affected most of the Western Europe with rising sea levels. So I'll link this article, people, in the description, and you can have a look at that. So this kind of backs up the flood stories of Noah in Ireland with evidence. And here's my evidence of a great meteor, a comet. A comet impact in AD536. And I'll read the little abstract here. A global climatic downturn has previously been observed in tree ring data associating with the years AD536, 645. We review the evidence for the explanation of this event, which involves a comet fragment impacting the Earth and exploding in the upper atmosphere. The explosion would create a plume, such as was seen during the impact of Comet Shoemaker-Levy 9 with Jupiter. The resulting debris deposited by the plume on the top of the atmosphere would increase the opacity and lower the temperature. We calculate the size of the comet required and find that a relatively small fragment of only about half a kilometre in diameter would be consistent with the data. We conclude that plume formation is a byproduct of a small comet impacts that must be added to the list of significant global hazards posed by near-Earth objects. So this was in 536, the year 536, and I think this is definitely linked to the Romans going back, leaving Britain. And it's a very, very interesting article, and it presents lots of good evidence. And the difference between a comet and a meteorite, people, usually meteorites or meteors are made up of metal, composition, where comets are mainly made up of ice. This is where you get the plume. And this plume would have rendered most of Britain uninhabitable, practically. Right, anyway, I'll read you a small part of it. The Earth is bombarded every day by debris from space. The majority of this debris takes the form of very small particles of dust. These objects are known as meteoroids, which as they run into Earth's... Sorry, I was just checking. You can see it. Meteoroids, which as they run into Earth's atmosphere, produce meteors, also known as shooting stars. Such objects are rarely hazardous. However, there are also much less frequent collisions with larger objects ranging in size from tens of meters to kilometers across, which may be asteroids or comets. Asteroids are primarily rock or metallic in composition, whereas comets are composed mainly of variety of ices with some rock. Objects of this size are generally more of a hazard. In fact, the UK government even set up a near-Earth object task force to evaluate the risks of impacts from such objects. Right, the AD event, AD536 event. In AD536, an event occurred which caused significant climate change. Dendrochronological tree ring evidence in oak trees salvaged from Irish peat bogs indicate a sequence of colder than average summers at this time. A similar effect is seen in the Fennoscandian pine trees, and a study of European oak trees data as a whole shows that the event starts in 536 and lasts until 545. Figure 1 shows the typical variation in tree ring widths. North American bristlecone and foxtail pines, Mongolian tree rings and Argentinian tree rings all show the same effect. The decrease in rate of growth in these years corresponds to a global temperature decrease of up to -3. In fact, 536 is noted as one of the coldest 2 or 3 years globally in the last 2,000 years. Figure 2 shows a result of the Irish oak trees and the US foxtail pines. There are also some limited historical records from the same period which record the presence of a dust veil. Chinese records refer to obscured skies and summer frosts. Mediterranean historians also record a dry fog event. Procopius records that the sun gave forth its light without brightness like the moon during the whole year, and it seemed exceedingly like the sun in eclipse. And Michael the Syrian states, the sun was dark and its darkness lasted for 18 months. Each day it shone for about 4 hours, and this light was only a feeble shadow. So this is where I think the transaction went. This is when people started really taking in the monotheistic idea of a god. Not these many gods. Just like the article said there, the sun was rendered as bright as the moon. So what good would that be for crops? And it states here, I've read the article already, it states that crop failures, this plume would have created a cloud in the sky for many years. Forest fires. No known impact crater can be linked to the 536 event, so if we're due to a comet collision, then the crater may lie unrecognised in a region such as the seabed, unlikely given that the seabed has not been very well surveyed, or else the comet has been destroyed in an airburst. If the airburst had sufficient energy to ignite one or more large-scale forest fires, Hodgkin and Nemikanov, we can calculate whether the soot emissions from these fires were sufficient to cause the observed climatic effects. So they're very thorough. They go into why the sky had this plume in it. And here's the conclusion, guys. I'll quickly read the conclusions. The surprising result of these calculations is just how small a comet fragment we have estimated was needed to cause the observed effects. A comet less than 1 kilometre in diameter has not been previously considered to present a global hazard, as opposed to a local hazard, let alone 1/2 a kilometre across. For example, the UK's government's Near-Earth Object Task Force classified impacts from objects in the size range 300 to 1500 metres to be a large subglobal hazard, and only recommended monitoring programmes of near-Earth objects greater than 1 kilometre in size. Yet our estimates show that if plume formation is a common byproduct of cometary airbursts, then a relatively small comet fragment can have a global effect. A possible origin for this object could be the Torrid meteor stream. This stream is a result of the fragmentation of a much larger comet some 20,000 years ago. The Earth passes through the Torrid stream in November and June each year, result in regular meteor showers, normally consistent of microscopic dust particles. And that's interesting how it passes through November and June, because I'm sure there's Celtic festivities that happen in November and June. It might be just me, but it's possible that a fragment could then have collided with the Earth as it passed through the beta portion of the stream early in 536, causing the atmospheric dust veil event. Other historic aspect of the period around 536 may also be significant. The period coincides with a mass population decrease in Europe. This is commonly known as the Justinian Plague and is believed to be the first appearance of the Black Death in Europe. The relevance to our hypothesis is that crop failures for several years in a row, while the dust veil was present, may have caused widespread starvation, leading to an increased susceptibility to disease among the remaining population. Small comets have previously been thought to be less hazardous than small asteroids, but our estimates show that a small comet fragment can have a global effect. If such an event happened today and crops failed over a significant part of the globe for several consecutive years, then once again a large percentage of the world's population would face starvation. So this is This is where the ideas of movements of people, because Doggerland, this comet, they're all reasons that people should spread throughout Europe. And I don't think the Celtic culture started somewhere in Austria or something like that and spread through. There's no way. There's no surviving Gaelic languages, anything like that, where in Ireland and Scotland there is. I don't think the Gaelic or Celtic culture, because there's a difference. We say Celtic. There's not just one form of Celtic. There's the Gaels, the Gauls, the Irish, the French. There's different forms of it, but I think it started mainly in Ireland and Scotland and spread its way through Europe, and probably went back again. So these stories of comets and great floods in the Bible definitely have some truth to them. There's no doubt. There's no doubt. So we have this comet and we have Doggerland here. Doggerland here. And this is where I believe the origin of the flood stories come from. So people, forget Mudflood, forget Tartaria. Britain is the Holy Land. Well, this is where all the evidence is pointing me. Britain is the place to look at. Britain did have a great flood. Britain was bigger. Britain had its culture stolen and plagiarized by Rome. And I will present all of this in 2019. And I hope people get on board and support this theory. Because it is just a theory and a lot of it is my opinions, but I'm going to show why. Christians shouldn't be offended. If anything, they should be happy. Because the religion exists. There's no doubt the religion exists. They just might be repeating words that weren't originally there in the religion. Like the letter J in Shawnee. St. John has its roots in Scotland. It began as Shawnee, a sea god, which the Celtic people made an offering to the sea, hoping the sea would give back seaweed as fertilizer for the crops. So they made a sacrifice to the sea god Shawnee, S-E-A-N-I-A-E or something like that. It was Gaelic, Shawnee. That turned into Sean, S-E-A-N, and then when they anglicised it, they added the J to John. So Shawnee, Sean, John, St. John, all started in Britain. It has its roots in Britain, and it's linked with Bridget. It's linked with all these festivities that still exist today, like Imbolc, Beltane, Samhain. They're all there. It's still hidden in there. The evidence is there to find. Unlike this 1850s rubbish about mud floods, which can be so easily debunked. If this is easily debunked, come and debunk it. Come and debunk my theories. There was a great flood in Britain. This is where Ireland and Britain get their flood stories. This is where the Bible get their flood stories. It all comes from this part of the world. Anyway, people, enough of that. This is just off the top of my head. I just had to get off my chest. And like I said, I wanted to continue. I've got piles and piles of notes. In fact, I think I might write my own book, because I had to take those two previous Comyns Beaumont videos down, because a woman called Ingrid, who I think is the editor or the publisher of the Great Deception book, was passively aggressive, sending me comments about copyright. And those videos were getting popular. And why should I advertise for somebody to make money when they won't let me even share the information? And I'm sure Comyns Beaumont, being a journalist and dedicating his life to that work, would have wanted the world to have a better look at it and not have someone monopolise it and keeping it and selling it in dribs and drabs. And I've seen a hangout with Ingrid to see what the woman was all about. She's got a YouTube hangout, and I think I know more about Comyns Beaumont than she does. And I think she's more into the new agey aspect of it. So this is why I've removed the videos. I think Comyns Beaumont was definitely onto something when it comes to Britain and the Bible. I think he throws in a lot of assumptions and throws in a lot of crazy stuff with giants and energy weapons and stuff like that, which he's got no evidence to back. But he was onto something with this part of it, and I will still look into Beaumont for this aspect. But I'm not advertising for somebody who won't present his work for nothing, because unless Comyns Beaumont, this is just fictional, and you need to sell it as a story. Fair enough. But if this is meant to be true, and this is history that's been stolen from us, this woman should be offering this out for nothing, or not even out for nothing, letting me read the book, and so people can buy the literature. But I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. Not for somebody who doesn't support the work the way I support it. So anyway, people, hope you have a great New Year. Happy New Year! And Hogmanay. And I'll bring you more videos of me going around to these ancient sites. This is one of my passions. One of my passions is going to these ancient sites, walking around them, and try to put myself in the people that lived back then. Try to visualise what the world was like back then. And you got these idiots like Mudflooders, Martin Leakey, idiots like that. Oh, it kind of pisses all over the work that I've done. And I go out in the fields. I'll go out to the places. I'm not sitting there looking at little drawings that Italians done of fantasy places. I can't remember his name, if it's Baracelli or something like that, but there's an Italian artist who used to draw fantastical environments. He used to throw in a wee bit Greek, a wee bit this, a wee bit that, all this different architecture, but it was all made up, it was all fantasy. And these mudflooders are sitting there going, where's Tartarian? Look at this building, look at that building, like buildings that never existed in the first place. Anyway, people, rant over, take it easy, have a nice day.